Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Nancy, and I'm the school superintendent of California School for the Deaf Riverside. So nice to see many of you here from the East and West Coast and everything in between to get together to talk about today's topic of extended school year, ESY. This will be moderated today, an opportunity to share your thoughts and discussions. Let me see. I want to make sure I have your position correctly, make sure I'm right. Okay, so this will be led by the Special Ed Director of Texas School for the Deaf, Elizabeth Sterling, as we can see here on the screen. So she will initiate our discussion today. Please feel free, just to let you know, we also have 2 interpreters here available, Kat and Lee. So anytime you're wanting to ask a question, share your 2 cents, what have you, please feel free to do so. Ensure that if you are going to be using spoken language, please unmute yourself or mute yourself as needed. I just do want to remind you to please stop video to where we see your name only, no picture. And then if you do have a question, then you can start video again and ask the question that you may have. All right, Elizabeth, I will turn the floor over to you.
Great, thank you. So again, my name is Elizabeth Sterling. This is my sign name. I'm the Special Ed Director at Texas School for the Deaf. So it's nice to meet all of you. And really today's topic, again, is related to extended school year, ESY. We'll talk about all of that because many of us are serving our students from other districts, other towns, and because we are residential schools, some of us, TSD, we are a residential school, so we do have unique considerations for extended school year services, more unique than public schools within our individual states. So really, I just wanted to talk about today, what we're doing that maybe is working well and celebrate some of those accomplishments. And then, what others are planning, and just kind of hear from each other in the different locations. I know there's governors and state recommendations, and just maybe brainstorm some ideas amongst each other about our specific challenges. I know for Texas, here at TSD, we have almost 600 students that we serve. And, those come from it's a large state, so those come from all over. And some of our students, have to fly to school and back home. Some ride charter buses. Some use our regular district bus, our yellow school buses. And so we have to think about, sanitizing, cleaning all of those things, doing temperature checks. Do we check before they even board a plane or get on the bus in order to arrive to school? Do we check everyone once they get to school campus? Do we do that immediately? How do we handle, staff that have to go back and forth at homecomings? So, just to kick things off, just planning of what to do. We would like to, hopefully start in July, bringing some of our students back and some of our independent life skill students and our applied programming students. Those that may struggle with the virtual e-learning environment. Hopefully, we're going to try to bring them back early to provide a little bit of catch-up services for them. And I know that there are some other, town halls at CEASD related to dorm students and residential life. And so I don't necessarily want to rehash all of those things. But what are you all planning for the summer? What's in the works right now? Are you planning to do, virtual instruction? Are you going to try to bring some students back to the campus? What is that going to look like for you all? So the floor is open. Do we have any comments? Oh, all right, perfect. Jenna, go ahead. Jenna, this is the interpreter. You're really hard to see. It's very dark, hard to see. Oh. So I guess let me talk a little bit about Psps Plans right now. We have initiated a task force and tried to have, subgroups of individuals to represent, the health center, risk management, and myself participating in these groups. In terms of the instructional division, we have principals and vice principals to really talk about what to do with curriculum and instruction. We're also talking about, employment and vocational rehab cases, and what do we do when staff are not wanting to come back to work for fear of contracting the virus or getting sick. And so how do we, prevent that? If someone tests with a fever, they get sent home. We want to make sure that we're maintaining safety of our students. And then we're going to try to go ahead and hire some subs or some contract individuals and add them to just our pool of employees that we may be able to call if someone needs to leave due to becoming sick or whatnot. So those are some of the questions that we're starting to really hone in on and answer. Right now we're not permitted to open schools just yet, but we still have to prepare for when it does happen, because we want to be able to provide services immediately when that permission comes through. Some considerations are budget. If we start earlier in July, that means we're adding days to our instructional employee contracts, and where are we going to get the funding in order to do that? So considerations. Are those some of the same questions and considerations that you all are having? Kim? Hi, yeah, I'm Kim from Indiana. Right now, we're at the point where we don't have a lot of answers, which is why I wanted to really participate in this workshop to see what's going on in other states. We haven't necessarily had any more updated information since our last news conference from the government. And so right now, we know June 30th is the date of the stay-at-home, lasting until. At that time, hopefully they'll announce, plans for what we're going to be doing after that. I know some of our local school districts that have placed students at Indiana School for the Deaf, they're already planning for virtual ESY. And, I think just right now my preference would be live in-person instruction, and I think that's our challenge. We really haven't started planning, to be honest with you. We do have a list of students that need ESY services, but will it be virtual? Will it be at campus? What will it look like? That's where we are a little bit at a crossroads and just feel stuck. And so we wanted to see what other schools are doing and get some ideas on how we can apply those to ISD. The answers right now are just still unknown, and we're waiting for updated information from our governor. So just unsure what to do next. I know some of the discussions that we've had like if we can do a staggered schedule. For example, maybe bringing our kindergartners, second and fourth graders back for a 2-week time period, and then staggering that with the other grade levels. So I know right now each student's, most of them do not have roommates right now. They're an individual. Oh, right now they do have roommates. But if we were to stagger bringing them back to campus, then it's a possibility that we could do individual rooms, just to maintain, that cleanliness, limiting exposure, and making sure social distancing occurs. So, if we start that during the summer, then maybe we have students stay for 2 whole weeks, staying on the weekend, and then going home for 2 weeks and coming back. So that way there's time, if they do become sick, they still have that 2 weeks, that mandatory 14 days to, stay at home and heal. And so we're still up and running, but we're just staggering the students coming to campus. Karen, did you want to say something? Karen? Oh, hi. No, I'm good. Okay. Denise, did you want to go ahead and comment? Yes. Hello, I'm Denise. I'm from California School for the Deaf Riverside. And just like Nancy, our superintendent, I'll just kind of explain a little bit what we've thought about planning for ESY. We will continue with distance learning for all of our students. We have 13 counties within a large area of Southern California. Similar to Very Texas, we're spread out. And so we're not prepared just yet to address cottages in residential aspect. But so we're going to continue with distance learning. We've asked parents for their feedback of the students that qualified for ESY services. And if the parents felt comfortable, we are prepping those families for what it's going to look like. So we've contacted each family of students who qualify thus far, and we've asked them, what's your experience up till now with distance learning, and then what would you recommend needs to be improved for ESY? In terms of the schedule and how many minutes of instruction or how many minutes of this and that are varied. Obviously, our ESY students are more likely not the best candidates for distance learning environment. And so that presents another challenge. But we are working very closely with the parents of students that will receive ESY services. We're involving our social workers. Right now, we're just really front-loading them with information and some training on technology that we're going to be using for ESY. We're having some daily communication with them just to prep and get ready for all of that. Are you considering doing that in July or beginning of August? What's the time frame? So our ESY, we've actually already determined our schedule, and we are restricted as, how we run as a state agency with our timelines. And so ESY will be June 15th through July 3rd. Okay. Okay, well, thank you for your comments. Thanks. Are there any, one idea that we had was to also buy, books or materials of activities, possibly games for ESY, create a package for each of the families, second grade, this is what they will be doing in ESY, and send those packages out to the families. And then we know everyone has the same resources, plus the teacher will, be able to explain what's in the box and what we will use for Monday and Wednesday, and, you know, for this group, individual instruction and so forth. So we've talked about the possibility of doing something like that. So the first week of June, we would order the materials and create the packages and send it out to assist with the virtual environment. Hopefully just trying to be creative and doing some fun activities, you know, doing the chalk walk activities, something similar to that. So we're trying to think of, you know, reading and writing. Scholastic has, you know, those book kits that we can order and mail out. So we can also mail, like, you know, the fidget things that we can send home, and maybe those push carts for the PT/OT aspect of any students that need those services. Hopefully they'll make it back to campus when everything is said and done, but you know, possibility of doing those types of things as well. Denise? Yes, and that's a great idea. I'd love that, creating those packages. We've also really had to focus on individual IEP goals related to ESY. I mean, obviously, but those goals really needing to focus on that progression, not regression, because the teachers will be, I'm sorry, what term are we wanting for this? Assigning. Okay. So the teachers will be assigned to the students soon. And the teachers will need to start reviewing those IEPs and the progress made and the individual plans. But I do like the idea of the packages. I'm not sure if we would do a standard package or if we would make it more individual to the students' needs, but I love that idea. Yes, great. I think also for us, we've recognized that many of our students live in a home environment where the parents are not signers. And so just to have consistent language exposure, you know, it's scary to think about a student having 3 months with no language. And so just small group turn taking and social time, you know, vocabulary. You were talking about front loading information. And so if we wanted to give students vocabulary for a class they may be taking in the fall, or in being congruent with any IEP goals that were established for their next year. Maybe the previous class had taught that, but it wasn't as beneficial. And so trying to really get them prepared for coming back in the fall, ready to tackle their new goals. You know, they've just finished all of their graded assignments and with our IEP goals. So just trying to think about how to be creative. So if this is an IEP goal, if we use, you know, a nonfiction book in ESY related to maybe a science class that they would be taking in the fall, we are then working on their current ESY goals and their reading tab, as well as preparing them for the fall. So those are also discussions we are having. You know, students are possibly not ready for the fall with everything that's been going on. So anyone else, any other discussions, comments, what's been going on, or what plans or ideas you have at your school, or what you're thinking about doing for ESY? No one knows. Everything's up in the air. Val? Hi, yes, I'm Val Hauser from Pennsylvania School for the Deaf. We went ahead and decided to have distance learning continue throughout the summertime. Pennsylvania has some mandates where we use some rules where we follow 3 color zones. So we have a green, a yellow, and a red zone. The red zone means you will be staying at home permanently during this time. So in Philadelphia right now, we are a red zone, and we don't know when that's going to change. We have to, make decisions based on where we are now, and so we are continuing with distance learning. We will change a little bit from what we are currently doing in the school year. What we're doing now is more group sessions. The summertime will be a more individualized approach to any IEP goals, possibly a 1-to-2 ratio or 1-to-1. And so those are currently our plans. And then hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll reopen in the fall. It's currently in discussion right now what to do about temperature checks and social distancing and how to do all of that with our young kids, because our preschool kids, how we want to see what ideas people have for how they're going to approach all of this with their younger kids. With the older students, it may be a little bit easier. Young kids, it's just trying to figure all of that out right now. So I'm very curious about some other ideas from all of you all. So our health center has started to investigate, the possibility of using those clear masks. We have potentially some individuals that are willing to make those. We just need to order the clear headgear. So those are some of the things we've investigated in terms of wearing masks when we come back to campus and how to make them deaf friendly. We've talked about trauma-informed practices and avoiding scaring students. Wearing masks, it's almost, like you said, it may be easier with those older students, but with our younger students, that have behavior intervention plans that are not going to be following the social distancing or the washing of hands, which is critical at this time. So maybe setting up stations and breaks throughout the day that just tell our students to do that.
Val, I agree, trying to figure out what to do about the masks, having the clear masks, and also the idea of teachers, if we can get those, having the teachers using those during distance learning to begin practicing that so students become familiar with seeing those masks. Because I'm sure that they are going to be completely overwhelmed as they're coming back to campus, and seeing people with masks on is going to feel uncomfortable. So that's one idea that we've had as well. I think that's a good idea to start doing that DESA, that demonstrating to students, getting them ready for that. Or sorry, to desensitize students to that, getting them ready for it. You're right, especially with our students who have autism or students with some social skill concerns or issues. They are needing to get more into the practice of that, so doing those kinds of activities. We've also talked about, we have new student family orientation. And typically we bring families to our campus prior to the start of the school year. It's the weekend of our registration, and that's, we've talked about doing virtual tours of the campus. Instead of that, having opportunities for departments and department heads and principals to explain about their programs, be able to show their buildings. I'm thinking that our health center may need to do some type of training with the students as well. Perhaps having one of our deaf nurses develop some videos related to when you arrive to campus, we'll need to check your temperature via forehead. And having some videos, resources like that, that we can send out to families, parents, students ahead of time during the summer. Once we determine how we want to go about doing it, of course. But also having training for the students. Hey, where do you stand? There's tape here on the sidewalk that you'll need to stand on. Also, I've been watching videos from China where they're demonstrating readiness for the kids to come back and what they're doing. Sorry, excuse me. Anyone else, have you begun planning or started brainstorming ideas about your return to campus, what that may look like for you? Is there anyone else who's considering possibly an alternating schedule amongst students when you come back? I'm curious about how many weeks you're thinking about doing ESY as well. Go ahead. Mine's actually more of a question that I'm curious for the group in terms of qualifying for ESY. I know some schools have large numbers that qualify, others have smaller numbers that qualify for ESY. I know August it is a little bit shorter versus starting in June for planning. Ours is typically in August, but I'm wondering if any of you out there have experience with parents or families who are wanting, let's say their child traditionally has not received ESY services, but now with coronavirus, they're actually wanting ESY services because they are showing regression. I'm wondering if anyone has seen any parental requests to determine whether or not they're qualifying. Not all of our students currently qualify for ESY. Some schools have large numbers, ours actually doesn't. So I'm just curious if any schools are experiencing those types of requests. I know what I've heard from at least the federal level, we've been watching a case that's regarding exceptional children. In ECE also, they have some webinars on that. Our decision at TSD is that anyone who qualifies for ESY prior to spring break, they are being automatically offered ESY services. They're qualifying for summer services regardless. However, we are considering that we may open and have kids back and adding some of those students who are really struggling to participate in virtual instruction. We have started generating a list. There are some students who have not shown up once to any of our virtual classes, right, us too, and therefore they're not receiving any services since, I think that's what, March 19th for us, since we closed. And so we are considering offering some services for those students if we're able to, quote unquote, go live. If we're unable to do that, then we are expecting that next year, the following ESY to actually have probably our numbers will double. Because if you take the data from the fall, from the time in which they left, we do anticipate that there will be some regression. And so we're planning to document that and then qualify them for the following summer ESY services. Thank you. Anyone else doing anything different regarding ESY? We typically have about 150 students for ESY services. Last year we did 2 weeks in June, 2 weeks in July, and then 1 week in August. We typically open school in August, roughly around August 16th, mid-month. We start pretty early anyways. Within the state of Texas, public schools usually open around that time of year. So in June, we would do half day for our ECE and elementary age students. And we still could do something like that again in July, and then we can alternate which groups are coming to campus because we're able to do some students in the morning and then send them on their way back home, and then the remainder of the students could come in the afternoon. So that is one possibility. We could still do a model like that. Really our greatest challenge is our preparedness for dorm students to come back. For our students in the high school, many of them are dormitory students. And that week in August usually focuses on school readiness. It means reviewing our behavior intervention plans, teaching students the rules, reviewing expectations, doing some practicing of using some of those strategies with counselors and behavior team, making visual schedules for our students for their A-B schedules that they may have. And then they actually physically walk through their schedule. So one day they may do school expectations, rules, reminders, BIP strategies. And then the following day, they may do something related to their schedule, let's say first through fourth period. And then the third day they come in and walk fifth through eighth or ninth period and start familiarizing themselves with that. And it's an opportunity for them to meet their teachers. And our VI students, visually impaired students, have a brief presentation with their teachers, reviewing their accommodations, and wearing their smocks. They have a different kind of shirt that's dark or color contrasting. Smock, that's the word. Thank you, I was looking for that word. And sorry, my cat's joining us. So we do those types of things in August traditionally. The academic focus is usually occurring during June and July. Is there anyone else doing like school readiness skills or any type of orientation like that for students returning, or perhaps being promoted between elementary to middle school or middle school into high school, even our students with autism, and helping them prepare, doing similar things like for 8th grade, moving up to 9th grade and what have you, meeting the principals, their behavior team, and all those different support individuals for their specific department that may be different from who they've had traditionally. Our school has not yet decided, but I have seen some discussion happening about the possibility of going back. So this year, with the students, actually bringing them to the next teacher, being escorted on to the next teacher. So they have a type of transition, kind of a send-off, for lack of a better word. I'm not sure when that will be decided, but that's also more appropriate for the younger ages, kind of leading them along that transition. Again, nothing's been decided about the fall yet. I'm wondering if you could do that virtually, do a Zoom meeting with the previous teacher, doing an introduction to the new teacher, that kind of thing. Yeah, and kind of join in the new class, so to speak, right? You can start talking about, you know, hey, these are my accommodations. This is what I need to be successful. These are the things I'm looking for. And I know that one thing that we have noticed, some of our students have struggled kind of with that learned helplessness during our current situation. Now that they're at home, they're really demonstrating more independence. I'm going to try it first before I ask for help, or contacting the teachers. And also, another positive that we've seen come out of it is parent involvement with lessons. They're watching, engaging with what we're using, seeing the visual aids that are being incorporated. For example, using BoardMaker, we've had parents request a subscription for that kind of software, being able to create materials at home. So it's really been interesting to see that kind of positive come out of this, that parents are starting to improve in their ASL skills. We've actually been using some of our dorm staff to provide ASL instruction to families because we're trying to continue to pay our employees and keeping them busy. So we're trying to support our families and encouraging them to do that. Yeah, and I want to add to that, on a positive note, our parents account, well, we use PowerSchool is the program that we're using, that their activity level prior to coronavirus was minimal at best, but since the school closure has occurred, the parent logins have greatly increased. It's been incredible to see that. Their involvement has increased, and we're really hoping to see that continue moving forward. Kim, did you have a comment? I saw you pop up momentarily. Well, I was just wanting to mention that here during the month of May is we're preparing the 5th graders to become 6th graders. They typically go on tour, they join them in for lunch and those different types of activities. And same thing for our 8th graders going into high school. However, without that, we've been using our support staff to do some videos with instruction along with principal messages. So for now, we're doing virtual watch parties for them, as well as having Zoom meetings to do that and participate in that. So we are having some type of activities, whether it be videos or Zoom meetings for now. And then in August, for specific students with autism or needing support with transition, we're trying to figure out how they'd be able to come early. We're not sure. We're probably going to have to wait until closer to that time and we have a better understanding of the landscape of what's going on prior to coming back that first day. But that's kind of where our plan stands for now. I'm curious, related to ESY, what are people planning to do for related services, such as PT, OT, speech services, behavior services? Are you planning to continue providing ESY with those? And if so, how are you intending to provide that? I know that we did receive teletherapy consent forms from our parents. Some of our parents chose to decline that teletherapy. They prefer in-person services. However, the vast majority of our parents were more than willing and motivated to continue with that teletherapy. They were wanting to continue to work with the students and the various related services, speech specifically. PT and OT, I know they've really struggled with it because truly it requires more in-person activities. And so they've been doing more consultation type services with families rather than direct services. And so we suspect we may have to do some compensatory services with our families come fall regarding PTOT. Anyone else related to how you're planning to do related services? I know we've been traditionally paying for that during ESY, but we are quite behind in our related services. So I think we're actually going to have extra days, more time for that for our service providers. Hi. Our OTPT SLPs are continuing to serve virtually, similar to what our teachers are doing. With OTPT, their challenge is equipment, so I'm trying to be creative with creating activities based on what's available at home. They've also been posting activities for the different children on Seesaw, so that way the parents are able to access those, do a check-in with the families, see how that's going, what it looks like, how are they progressing. And so it's more of parent coaching that we're seeing in that regard. A lot of that has been happening. And we're documenting services that way and continuing our provision rather than waiting until the fall. So it seems that it's been going well so far. That's good. I think that's similar to what we're seeing as well. It's a lot more of coaching and consulting with parents and families. I think it's really nice because we don't often have the opportunity to do that kind of thing. And also we're seeing better participation with our IEP meetings, because now the entire family is able to participate via Zoom and be a part of that. And so now mom and dad are able to join, whether it be from a separate device or location. And what we're often struggling is, so for example, having a local school district participate by phone, and then we have a parent who's on another phone line, and then a parent on video phone, and then interpreters. So trying to coordinate all of those logistics. So we've actually found that Zoom has been fairly effective with um, this, and we're considering continuing this for virtual meetings because everyone is able to have their own screen and they're able to choose who they're wanting to watch or pin. And then the shared screen feature is an opportunity for the students to share their transition plan that they've created or PowerPoint for our high school students. And so really, we have learned so much about the way in which we can use technology as a tool to help support us in connecting with our families. Is there anyone else who's wanting to talk about what they've been doing related to related services, or what their action plans are for ESY? Most of you, I'm sure, are kind of in the same situation of waiting for guidance. We have plan A if virtual, plan B if it needs to be in real life, in person, what that means bringing people back on campus, if we need to have limitations or needing to have, let's say, 10 people in a single room with staff, and what all that's going to entail. In our younger grades, we have things like motor lab and movement lab that our PT and OT team help facilitate. And that's really more of general ed, so to speak, type of thing. And that's for all of our students to participate. And we use a curriculum that's called Ready Bodies, Ready Minds. And that teaches core strength and how to sit with proper posture. And it also looks at fine motor and gross motor movement skills. So just recently, actually, we had a conversation about, do we continue that type of activity in the fall? Because that means that we would have to have more intensive sanitation occurring for that class. And so we have a ball pit, which we probably are not going to be able to employ that type of activity. And then looking at PE, typically that's a team taught class. And so we probably won't be able to have team taught classes at this point. And so we may have to give up some of those other models. And so we're looking at the possibility of hiring some more temporary staff to be able to split up our classes into smaller groups. So.
I saw Don recently commented in the chat box about making video examples of movements for the students to follow. We have also done the same thing at TSD, our team approach. We use Seesaw, that software platform for our elementary students and for that program. And for our high school students, we're using, I think, something similar to Google Classroom and Canvas, those platforms for middle school, high school students. We don't have a learning management system, or LMS, as of yet, and I think that's one thing that we've realized we've needed to be consistent and standard on for all programs. It really would push us into, considering using that. And right now there just aren't any plans in place, but we do have to proceed regardless. and hopefully we will be able to pick one to use. I know that we have Schoolology is one that we're considering, but we have not delved into that and used it as of yet. For those who do use that, do you like it? In general, what are you all using for virtual instruction? You can either use the chat box if you don't want to pop up on the video screen, and I will reiterate what people have typed in that chat box. Do you all have teams that you may have developed similar to task force in order to approach this? And I'm very curious as to who is represented on those task force. Who's helping to make your health decisions? Is it your medical director or the head nurse? We have, set up our teams. I know it's going to be a lot of crossover, cross discussion amongst those task force, but recently our health center has talked about the possibility of buying acrylic sort of transparent or see-through dividers for each of our students. And, so the kids would come in to get their medications and they would have that see-through screen. Because I believe it's in the morning, we have around 250 or 150 students getting medication within about a 30-40 minute time frame between when they wake up and when they go to school. And so having to take medication in the morning at breakfast time. So we've considered how to really, kind of divide that up. Are we able to add these, screens, these dividers with the bottom few inches open to where you can pass medication through and give our nurses a little more personal protection? What other kinds of discussions have your schools have related to the reopening of school? Kim? Yeah, so I was involved recently with another CEASD town hall talking about checking of temperatures. And at ISD, our personnel department talked about the employees themselves need to check their own temperatures before they come to work. And there was another state that said, no, all staff reporting to work have to report to the health center first to get checked before reporting to their workstations. So that was interesting. As of right now, are you making staff go to the health center first? Or are you trusting them to do a self-check? I'm just curious what other schools are leaning toward or are doing. In terms of task force, we haven't officially established any task force. We've had discussions and dialogue with our health center director. Do we have, temperature check equipment available or ready? Should we be ordering some? Are we going to trust our staff to do the honor system of a self-check? Or are we also going to check them when they report to campus? So we've just started sort of that dialogue amongst us. Haven't made final decisions. Yeah, I think that's one of our biggest discussions right now. Do we only require all of these things of people that have direct access to our students? Or do we use an honor system for our cafeteria staff, dorm staff? We have business office staff, HR, all of our different departments across campus. They will have interaction with each other, with the communities. Are we going to permit visitors to come on campus during this time? We've seen some things related to, parents picking up their children outside of the building and not allowed to come into the building because we want to maintain as best we can a sanitized environment. So one problem I just want to kind of throw out onto the table, this may be best discussed at another time, but we've had discussions about what IEP meetings are going to look like for us in the fall. Most of our IEP meetings have 12, 14 people in a room, and how is that going to look like? We've discussed about social distancing and safe practices in the classroom, but now about IEP meetings. So we've started that discussion. How are we going to get local school districts involved, parents, any reps that we have, plus maintaining the social distancing 6 feet standard? That's a question mark. I just wanted to share some concerns related to, related service as a whole. For example, of nurses. We have a number of nurses in that health center department. And then our other staff is based on union agreement contracts. And so we cannot administer a temperature check. And that just leaves a few nurses on duty that day, possibly 2, with over 200 to 400 students on a daily basis who are riding school buses. And then the school buses are coming from different districts, and how are they approaching it? And so I think for us, there are just so many variables in different areas that we have to address: transportation, health services, IEP meetings, and how to approach managing that aspect with individuals coming on campus, visitors. So for now, our thoughts are to tackle one at a time. So we're looking at extended school year first. So this week, as Denise mentioned, this week, we are starting to think about that different approach that we're using for ESY. And this week, we're also addressing our IEP meeting approach. We've noticed that we've faced several challenges, but overall, it's been a very good practice for us of just kind of trial and error of ideas of how we're going to approach it. A perfect model is not going to happen for any of us, but I think opening up those lines of dialogue and discussion to have this done so that we're not necessarily wasting other people's time and having those ideas happen. Right now, it's been fairly quiet from everyone that's involved in this meeting, so I really do want to hear those ideas so that we can have those discussions. Yeah, we need people to join in. Tell us your thoughts. What are your concerns? What are you planning short term and long term? So forth. Any questions you may have? Val? Hi. So we've just started discussing reopening in the fall. And all of those comments that have been made thus far, have happened in our discussions. We are planning for the most rigid type of procedure. And then if we have to, we can back off of those and become a little more flexible. But we want to start having a more strict approach to all of this. That's sort of what we're doing. I think, with school buses and that type of thing, it really also depends on their local districts and what they've decided. We can't necessarily manage them. We can, focus on what our school does in terms of field trips and using of buses. But, do we transport at a separate time? Because we don't have a residential program here at our school. So how do we then stagger that schedule? we are discussing having almost like a split two-prong approach, learning on campus versus virtual learning, because there are some parents that are saying they're not ready. We may be ready for certain things, but they're not. So we're trying to prepare for that as well. So I'm curious about the students that have, I guess, students who are medically fragile. And when I say medically fragile, I mean maybe they have a privately contracted nurse one-on-one for any feedings or for use of a catheter or trachea, a trach. Maybe we have one student that has almost like a vibrating machine to break up any pulmonary congestion from allergies. So I'm just curious, related to ESY and for those medically fragile students that do qualify for ESY, and you know, if parents are ready for them to start back to school, you know, so that they don't. I'm sorry, Elizabeth, can you back up and say that again? So just being ready for, I guess, childcare in that sense of the word. Parents are wanting us to provide, you know, those childcare services because it's been, you know, a lot. So those who have, you know, they don't want the students to miss school unless they're very, very sick. So I'm just curious if you're planning to have, I guess, like mentioned, two separate discussions, one about students that may need ESY for behavioral services or socially emotional services, and if it's fine to open and provide those services for those kids. But then maybe a separate discussion for students that may have medical conditions or situations, and how do we want to approach that? You know, can we even say we are not the appropriate place for this, or do we let parents make that decision, especially if we're going to bring them back to live in a dorm? How do we bring them back? So I'm just curious, for any schools that provide services such as that, how do you make those determinations of who can come back and how do we bring them back? Melissa, you had a comment? You showed up? Oh, okay. Yes, Dawn. So several people have asked me this question already, and I don't really have an answer. I know that in previous trainings, all of that information still applies. If a child is medically fragile and at a high risk for exposure of health situations, I would assume parents would let us know that the doctor has certain orders that need to be followed. And then after that, it would just be careful planning. I know when they transition back to their school districts, it's back to home services. But I can't imagine that we could continue to do classroom instruction plus homebound type services. Ideally, you know, it would be that we could, but I'm sure most of us are in the same boat here trying to figure out what to do in these situations. We do have two students that we will probably need to have a discussion such as this, but we will rely more on the home district. I'm wondering if we all need to consider, for students such as that, having some sort of medical release from their doctor before they come back to campus, so that we can get an all clear from a medical physician. Yeah, and Dawn said, yes, I would prefer doctor's note. I guess we'll all have to check with our school attorneys on how to handle that, if we need any medical clearance before we can admit new students, or in light of this, socioeconomic time, we will need medical clearance for students to come back. That's a good idea. I didn't even really think about that until those comments were made in today. Because those students, parents will want to have extended school year services. So it's definitely something that we need to start thinking about, potentially come up with a form and send it out to parents asking for that clearance before they can come back to campus. And Val's just saying, good idea, but yes, you need to check with an attorney. Anyone else want to share plans for ESY or considerations? Okay, we are a quiet group. Nancy? Really, that was sort of all of the questions. Again, we'll just need guidance, I'm sure, from CEASD, from CASE, and other agencies and state organizations and state governments that'll tell us what we can do. I know that we are very close with our Health and Human Services Department. We're going to be working with them, talking with them about what we can do, what we cannot do. And because we are a very different animal compared to our public school, mainstream school system. They're talking about what Val mentioned earlier in her comments, trying to take that staggered schedule approach, elementary starting, at 7:30, and then middle school starting at 8:30, high school starting at 9:30. Possibly we could go for longer days if done that way. We've talked about that possibility of having a longer day and then having longer breaks so that the kids stay the weekend, and then at Thanksgiving, instead of a 1 week, having a 2-week break potentially, winter break, possibly having 2 or 3 weeks, adding some time to that. And then I would say it depends on how many positive cases are still being identified.
And again, I think in looking at those confirmed cases, if those do occur on campus, then we're going to have a different discussion about the requirements for closing. So again, I think that for ESY, people are still kind of a wait and see as to what to do. It seems that we do have people who are planning for virtual as well. Val? Yes, I think that even though we are doing virtual for ESY, still whenever the school reopens, we need to be thinking about staff trauma as well and how to be supportive of all of them, their nervousness, how to respond if they have students who are sick and what have you. So that's something I just wanted to mention for everybody and their thoughts on that. Do you all have access to something that's called EAP, Employee Assistance Program? If you don't, that may be something you want to investigate adding for your school. EAP allows for counseling sessions and different types of workshops or trainings. I know that I've contacted them before. We have some staff who actually weren't getting along. And so we actually brought them in to do like some mediation, doing some type of PowerPoint training regarding team building. And they've actually really been able to assist us a lot. So EAP might be able to provide some types of services as well to staff prior to us getting started again. I'm thinking that if we were to do ESY, let's say in July, and then staff would be working with those students, we could do some type of training related to their work. And we always pay for prep days prior to ESY anyways. And so we could add a day or two in there for the staff to be able to talk about any fears they may be harboring, any concerns, their stress levels. And we find that even though people are still working from home, many of them are working actually greater than 40 hours. They are working with families during the evening time, simply based on parental schedules, some weekend lessons, what have you. So they're also developing materials and lessons and then loading those into the system. And then I know there's some individual lessons as well for the students. Some are group-based. Lessons with the students are able to do so. And so I know that our staff has really been working very hard. So I know that they have their own stressors that they are facing, things related to their own families. That was one thing that we had, that if we talked about starting school in July, that if we do so, what if there's no childcare for our staff? What will we do in that event? I know my own children at public school, they're talking about doing an alternating schedule. And I'm fortunate enough to have two teenagers that are able to stay home on their own. But if you have younger children at home and your students only going to school, let's say a week at a time, and then they're off for a week, then that means that they may not have full staff available to work. And so that's another consideration as well, not only for ESY, but also regular school programming. Do we have sufficient staff to operate the program if we're coming back to campus? So Val, I said yes, that there is EAP at CSDR. And then I'm seeing Denise, oh, sorry, we have it at PSD, and then Denise is saying it's at CSDR. If you don't have a program like that, it's definitely worth investigating. I think we at TSC have really benefited from having access to EAP. We also, as part of our School Health Advisory Committee, which is abbreviated SHAC, we've been working together with a program called SAFE, which is our domestic violence and abuse organization here locally. And so we have been talking with them about gathering resources because right now we have dealt with students who they themselves have discussed self-harm. And so we've been reaching out to mental health authorities, ensuring that they're connecting with the parents to ensure that the students are safe. And so we know that we do have students who are in an abusive home environment right now, and they're stuck. And so the stress levels for students as they come back to campus is elevated. And so we may need to do some retraining regarding trauma. And we also use the MANT system at TSD. Right now, it's not the best practice but we've been doing online MANT training with actually our nurses, introducing them to some of the concepts and relation building with students, talking about building those healthy relationships, reminding them about looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so we do have students that come to TSD who right now at home, they do not have those basic needs being met. So our biggest thing right now at the school is to ensure that parents know where to get food and other resources for them. So we have updated our parent website with a list of resources, whether that be financial or related to unemployment, housing for our students who are homeless, having a variety of resources available because I'm sure that you're all dealing with similar type situations. So I think that for us also related to summer programming, yes, we have students who do qualify for ESY, but we also have vulnerable and at-risk students who are needing us to have consistent connection with someone, having those check-ins. So we're actually considering paying our counselors and social workers to continue during the summer months to help maintain those weekly check-ins with some of our students and families that we know are struggling. We have a parent right now that is struggling with managing behavior. And we have students who are out of control in home, students who are having to be hospitalized during this time. So again, ensuring that they are feeling supported by the school, even though we're far away. And I think that many of you are dealing with the same type of thing. I think that we have two things that we need to consider, not only ESY, but also our needs to continue liaising with families during the summer. So are you all thinking about doing similar type things with your students? Even if it's not ESY specific, but trying to continue programming of some sort, whether it be counseling or what have you, because I know some of our students do not really receive counseling as related service. However, still they are needing that services to continue. And so what are your thoughts on that? Is anyone else doing that sort of thing? Oh, hi. So yes, for sure. We are planning to continue counseling support, and for our social worker, they've really rolled up their sleeves, reached out to families to determine what their needs are. We are having weekly meetings within departments. We have a rep from different departments coming in to discuss what families are needing some additional supports. And then we're able to transfer lists to our social workers so they can divide and conquer and doing some follow-up with providing supports. Some of them are even driving out to the homes, helping with Wi-Fi setup, any kind of disconnection issues, definitely going above and beyond the call. I've been very impressed with the type of supports that we've been able to provide to families through this. I think social workers are the key, but we are planning to continue that for sure during the summertime. Great. Anyone else? Oh, we have a very quiet group today. All right. Uh, thank you, everyone. If there's no other comments or questions before we conclude today, I do want to say thank you to Elizabeth, Kat, and Lee for everyone working together. Any final comments or questions? All right. Oh, go ahead, Elizabeth. Oh no, I was just going to say, I think I really enjoyed this time, this opportunity to do this. And obviously we have so many decisions that are needing to be made amongst leaders, and just continuing to connect with one another and being in touch with each other, because I know that we will, it's especially hard because there's other special ed people who are in our state that don't necessarily understand what we're doing and what we need to serve our students. Yes, absolutely. And are seeing that our students are coming from other geographical locations with the addition of the dorm piece. It's not like being at a private school. So I think that we are really going to struggle to serve our students, and I think that we're all doing a great job. Oh yes, absolutely. So again, just listening to other CEASD meetings that have been occurring, what others are doing, and truly, I think everyone's doing amazing things for our students. So hopefully we'll be able to get some answers soon. And then people, as you mentioned, or has been mentioned, can roll up their sleeves and keep going. Yep, absolutely. I know that we'll be getting together again to discuss part 2 as that comes up. So thank you, Elizabeth, for your time. And what you just said is so very true. Everybody stay safe, stay strong, and everyone have a great rest of your afternoon. Bye. Thank you both.